I mean, look,
He
I think how they have deployed him has changed a bit out of necessity. I mean,
You
a
have to.
a
Right.
coordinator cannot be as 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 ever present on the recruiting trail as a position coach. You just can't. You can't do it. Now you can't be a zero. I mean, your
I mean, right.
your offensive and defensive coordinator, they can't be zeros as recruiters. Like they got to be closers. They got to be finishers. They got to be sort of like head coaches, except a little more involved out on the trail, right? And I think they have settled into a situation with Sherrone where he's found that balance where, yeah, his primary focus is on coordinating for the team, but and really hyper focusing in on his position, and then sort of filling in, making sure he touches all of the offensive commits. So what I anticipate happening as the evaluation period opens up, with only a handful of guys for two spots, I think it frees Sherrone up to do something like I expect to see him like drop in on all the offensive commits in the class, right? The other thing that it frees him up to do, start focusing more on 25 recruiting, but then that spot duty, that recruiting spot duty that he used to do, where he could drop in on Darion Green Warren and Cali and recruit him, and drop in on Dax Hill and be his primary recruiter. By getting his recruiting for his position out of the way, likely by mid to late June, now you can maybe utilize Sherrone a little more like you used to, as like that heavy hitter. Like you need some help in the recruitment. Now Sherrone's gonna have a little more time to dedicate to those recruitments, Brice. Whereas because he's a coordinator and the offensive line coach, that if you didn't have your class full, his primary focus would have to be on those things.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing too, and I've said this, and this is just my opinion, but I think this is Jim Harbaugh's best coaching staff in terms of recruiting ability. I don't really see a hole on this coaching staff. I know people have had their knocks on Mike Hart. Well, then he lands a top 100, you know, running back and Jordan Marshall. And his evaluations so far seem to be pretty good because Benjamin Hall, Sam, he looked pretty solid in that spring
Yeah, he
game.
did.
You know,
Yeah, he
for a guy
did.
that a lot of people didn't want in this class, supposedly, he looked pretty good. And then,
A
I
lot of fans
mean,
didn't want the class. So
right. And then you look at, some of the new hires, Kirk Campbell, what he's been doing with quarterback recruiting. You look at CP, what he's, done with linebacker recruiting and other recruitments on top of that as well. I just don't see any holes. And like you said, if Michigan can basically set their offensive line board and close shop by summertime, and then he can put his fingerprints on other recruitments going forward into the fall and winter, man, that could make a world of difference. And
yeah.
you kind of already see that in other recruitments. I mean, you see Jay Harbaugh with Galen Bear in Idaho,
Hmm.
you know, with who's a wide receiver. And obviously he's the safeties coach, but he recruited Colston Loveland. So you see guys go in certain areas and territories. But Sherrone Moore, he just seems to have a knack about him. I mean, you look at the recruitment of Daxton Hill, how pivotal he was in that recruitment to land him and keep him. When Alabama looked like they had him in the fold and Michigan was able to reel him back in, Sherrone Moore was a big reason why he decided to come here. So there's a lot going in Michigan's direction in their favor. And I don't know, man. I've been asked this a lot on the board, Sam, and I'm curious about your opinion on this too, but I I don't see anything worse than a top seven class.
Oh no.
I mean, how they're positioned with so many top guys
Yeah, definitely
and
top
how the
10.
momentum is going right now. I mean, like you said, every podcast we seem to be talking about a new commit. So, and these are not just some, low 3 stars, project guys, that developmental guys. These are guys that I think can make impacts early, in their college careers as well. So, there's a lot to be excited for, especially with offensive line recruiting from the here, now, and also in the future.
Yeah, man. It's Like I said, let's call those good problems. A good problem to have for us is we're going to have Eugene Hankerson join us here on the podcast coming up. Before we get to Gene, though, let's talk about another guy. So we're going to be talking to Gene about a defensive line prospect from Pennsylvania, at least one of the guys. We'll talk to him about a defensive lineman from Pennsylvania that Michigan is trending up in a big way with it. He's an under the radar guy, at least by the recruiting services, but by coaches, I mean, he has one of the best offer lists in PA. So one of the hottest prospects in the East.